A flight attendant slipped me a napkin that said, "Pretend to be sick. Get off this plane immediately." I thought she was crazy and ignored her. 2 hours later, she came back, tears streaming down her face, and begged, "Please, I'm begging you. Get off before it's too late." What I didn't know was that in exactly 47 minutes, everything on that plane would change forever. Hey besties, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this absolutely insane story, tell me, where are you watching from? US, UK, Canada, Australia, Africa? I love knowing how far these stories reach. Drop your location below. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Your support means everything. This is the story of how a stranger on a flight tried to save my life, how I almost didn't listen, and how one napkin with 7 words changed everything I thought I knew about trusting my instincts. I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped onto that plane. Not because anything obvious was happening, but because of the feeling. That uncomfortable sensation in your gut that tells you something isn't right, even when everything looks normal. I was at JFK Airport in New York, boarding a flight to Dubai. Business class, seat 3A. A trip I'd been planning for months. The flight attendant greeting passengers at the door smiled professionally, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag said Sarah, and when I glanced at her face, I saw something that made me pause. Fear. Not nervousness, not stress, actual fear. But I dismissed it, told myself she was probably just having a bad day. Everyone has bad days, right? I found my seat, stowed my carry-on, and settled in. The plane was full, probably close to 300 passengers. Business travelers, families, tourists. Everything seemed normal. The safety demonstration began. Sarah was one of the flight attendants doing it. And as she went through the practiced motions pointing out exits, demonstrating seatbelts, I noticed her hands were shaking. Our eyes met for just a second. And in that second, I saw desperation. Like she was trying to tell me something without words. Then she looked away. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied to the runway. The engines roared. And then we were airborne, climbing through the clouds over New York. I tried to relax, closed my eyes. Told myself everything was fine. About 30 minutes into the flight, after the seatbelt sign turned off, Sarah came through the cabin with drinks. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked when she reached my row. Her voice was professional, steady. "Just water, please," I said. She poured the water, handed me the glass. And then, as she turned away, she placed something on my tray table. A napkin, folded small. I looked down at it, confused, then looked up at her. But she was already moving to the next row, continuing her service like nothing had happened. I unfolded the napkin. 7 words were written in rushed, shaky handwriting. "Pretend to be sick. Get off this plane." My heart stopped. I looked up, searching for Sarah. She was 3 rows ahead now, still serving drinks. She didn't look back at me. I stared at the napkin, my mind racing. What was this? A joke? Some kind of prank? But flight attendants don't play pranks. Not like this. Was she serious? Did she actually want me to fake an illness and demand the plane land? That seemed insane. We were over the Atlantic Ocean by now. You can't just land a plane in the middle of the ocean because one passenger claims to be sick. I crumpled the napkin and shoved it in my pocket. This was ridiculous. I was being paranoid. I went back to my movie, tried to focus, tried to forget about the napkin and the fear in Sarah's eyes. But I couldn't. An hour passed, then another. Sarah came through the cabin again, this time collecting trash. When she reached my row, she leaned in close. "Please," she whispered. So quiet I almost didn't hear her. "Please listen to me. You need to get off this plane." "What are you talking about?" I whispered back. "Why?" "I can't explain, not here. But please, trust me." "Trust you? I don't even know you. You're asking me to what? Fake a heart attack? Make them land the plane? That's insane." "I know how it sounds. But please, I'm begging you." Before I could respond, another flight attendant called her name from across the cabin. Sarah straightened up immediately, her professional mask back in place, and moved away. I sat there, heart pounding, completely confused. What was happening? I looked around the cabin. Everything seemed normal. Passengers watching movies, sleeping, reading, the hum of the engines, the soft lighting. Everything exactly as it should be on a long international flight. But Sarah's desperation had been real. I could feel it. CTA#2, audience question. Besties, pause for a second. If you were on this plane and a flight attendant handed you that napkin, would you listen? Or would you think she was crazy like I did? Honest answers only in the comments. Another hour passed. We were about 3 hours into the 12-hour flight now. I couldn't stop thinking about the napkin. About Sarah's face. About the fear I'd seen. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had mental health issues. Maybe she was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe this was a bizarre cry for help that had nothing to do with the actual flight. But something didn't feel right. I started paying more attention to my surroundings. Really looking at the other passengers. The crew? And that's when I noticed things I hadn't before. A man in row 7, tall, broad-shouldered, business suit, kept checking his watch every few minutes. Not casually, obsessively, like he was counting down to something. 2 men in the back of business class were sitting separately but kept making eye contact with each other. Brief glances. Like silent communication. And the flight attendants. 3 of them were acting normally. But Sarah and one other, a younger woman, both looked tense, anxious. Or maybe I was just seeing patterns where there were none. Maybe paranoia was making me imagine things. I needed to use the bathroom. Maybe walking around, stretching my legs, would clear my head. I unbuckled my seatbelt and made my way toward the lavatory at the front of the cabin. As I passed the galley, the small kitchen area where flight attendants prepare food and drinks, I heard voices. Quiet, urgent. I slowed down. Pretended to look at something on my phone while listening. Can't just tell them. They won't believe us. Sarah's voice. Then what do we do? The younger flight attendant. We can't just let this happen. I tried warning one passenger. She didn't listen. Then we need to try harder. We need to... One of them noticed me. The conversation stopped abruptly. Both women smiled at me, professionally pleasant. Can I help you with something? Sarah asked. Just heading to the bathroom, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Of course, she stepped aside to let me pass. I locked myself in the lavatory, my hands shaking. What had I just heard? We can't just let this happen. Let what happen? I splashed cold water on my face, stared at myself in the small mirror. You're overreacting, I told myself. You're tired, stressed, imagining things. But I didn't believe it. When I came out of the bathroom, Sarah was waiting in the galley area, alone now. We need to talk, she said quietly. Not here, not where anyone can see. But please, just listen for 2 minutes. Against every logical thought in my head, I followed her to the very back of the business class cabin, near the divider curtain that separated us from economy. What is going on? I demanded, keeping my voice low. Why did you give me that napkin? Why do you want me off this plane? Sarah glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. Because in about 2 hours something is going to happen on this plane. Something bad, and I don't know if we can stop it. My blood ran cold. What kind of something? I can't give you details. Not yet. But there are people on this plane who aren't what they seem, and when we reach a certain point in the flight, she stopped. Took a breath. Just please. The next time the captain asks if there are any medical professionals on board, say you're sick, say you need emergency medical attention. Force them to divert the plane. That's insane. They'll know I'm faking. They won't. Not if you sell it. Say you have chest pain, difficulty breathing. They'll have no choice but to land. But why me? Why not just tell the captain yourself? Because I tried. He doesn't believe me. None of them do. They think I'm paranoid, crazy, but I know what I overheard. I know what's going to happen. What did you overhear? Before she could answer, a male voice called out from behind us. Sarah, is there a problem here? We both turned. One of the male flight attendants, older, stern-looking, was standing there, watching us with suspicious eyes. No problem, Sarah said quickly, her professional mask snapping back into place. Just helping this passenger find her seat. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded and walked away. Sarah looked at me one more time. Please, she whispered. Please trust me. Then she was gone. disappearing into the galley. I stood there, frozen, my mind spinning. Every logical part of me said to ignore this, to go back to my seat, to assume Sarah was having some kind of episode and forget about the whole thing. But that feeling in my gut, that uncomfortable, insistent feeling, was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. I walked back to my seat slowly, my legs feeling weak. 2 hours, she'd said. Something would happen in 2 hours. I checked the time. That would put us about 5 hours into the flight. Roughly over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the furthest point from land in either direction, the worst possible place for something to go wrong. I buckled my seatbelt and tried to think rationally, tried to figure out what to do. Should I trust a stranger? Risk looking like an idiot by faking a medical emergency? Or should I ignore the warning and hope everything would be fine? I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. And that indecision might have been the biggest mistake of my life. Because exactly 93 minutes later, everything changed. I spent those 93 minutes in a state of heightened anxiety, watching everything and everyone around me. The man in row 7 kept checking his watch. Now I was certain he was counting down to something. The 2 men who'd been making eye contact were now sitting in different sections of business class. But I saw them exchange another glance as one walked past the other toward the bathroom. And Sarah. Every time I saw her in the cabin, she looked more terrified, more desperate. I was about to do it, about to call for help and fake chest pain. Force the plane to land at the nearest airport, whatever the consequences. But before I could press the call button, something happened that made the decision for me. A loud sound, not quite an explosion, more like a bang followed by a hissing noise. The plane shuddered. Passengers gasped. Some screamed. The cabin lights flickered, and then the oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments. Chaos erupted. People shouting, crying, grabbing for the masks. The captain's voice came over the intercom, trying to sound calm but failing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a cabin pressure issue. Please remain calm and secure your oxygen masks, as demonstrated. My hands were shaking as I pulled the mask over my face. Around me, passengers were panicking. Parents helping children, flight attendants moving through the cabin trying to help people who couldn't get their masks on. The plane was descending, rapidly. I could feel it in my stomach, that sinking sensation of falling. This was it. This was what Sarah had been trying to warn me about. But how did she know? What had she overheard? Through the chaos, I saw Sarah making her way toward the cockpit. She wasn't helping passengers. She was moving with purpose, with determination. I unbuckled my seatbelt against protocol, but I didn't care and followed her. She didn't notice me at first. She was focused on the cockpit door, trying to get it open. But it was locked from the inside. "11 security protocols. Sarah," I shouted over the noise. "What's happening?" She turned, surprised to see me. "You need to get back to your seat." "No. Tell me what's happening. Tell me the truth." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she made a decision. "The pressure loss isn't an accident," she said. "Someone sabotaged the plane." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I overheard them before takeoff. 2 men. They were talking about a device. Something that would cause decompression at a specific altitude. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe I misheard. But then I started noticing things. The way they were acting. The way they kept checking the time. "Did you tell someone? The captain? Security?" I tried, but I had no proof. No evidence. Just something I overheard. They thought I was being paranoid. Making things up. Tears were streaming down her face now. "I tried to warn you because you were sitting in business class, near the front. I thought if I could get even one person off the plane before it took off, I could save someone." The plane shuddered again. We were still descending. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Can they land safely?" "I don't know. The pilots are trying to get us to the nearest airport. But if the damage is worse than they think..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Besties, I know this is intense, but stay with me. If you're listening to this story, I need you to hear what happened next. And when this is over, I need you to drop a comment telling me, have you ever had a warning sign you ignored? Because what I learned that day changed how I listen to my instincts forever. And please, if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps me share these important stories. The oxygen masks eventually stopped being necessary as the plane leveled out at a lower altitude. The cabin pressure stabilized. But we weren't safe yet. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, we're diverting to the nearest airport, Shannon, Ireland. We should be landing in approximately 40 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. 40 minutes. The longest 40 minutes of my life. Sarah finally got permission to enter the cockpit. She went in and didn't come back out. I returned to my seat, my whole body shaking. Around me, passengers were crying, praying, holding each other. The reality of what had almost happened, what might still happen, was sinking in. Emergency services were waiting when we landed in Shannon. Fire trucks, ambulances, police. As soon as the plane was on the ground and the doors opened, authorities boarded. They went straight to row 7 to the man who'd been checking his watch, and to the 2 men who'd been making eye contact. All 3 were escorted off the plane in handcuffs. The rest of us were held for hours while investigators questioned everyone. Searched every inch of the aircraft. Tried to piece together what had happened. This is what I learned. The 3 men were part of a larger group planning to cause maximum chaos on multiple international flights. The device they'd planted hidden in a maintenance panel was designed to create a slow decompression that would force an emergency landing but not cause immediate disaster. Why? Insurance fraud, it turned out. Complex schemes, involving life insurance policies and flight insurance claims. They'd been caught before they could execute the full plan, thanks to Sarah's warning leading to heightened security attention once we landed. The investigation revealed that Sarah had actually saved hundreds of lives. Not just on our flight, but on others that were also targeted. She'd noticed suspicious behavior during boarding, overheard fragments of conversation, put pieces together that no one else had, and she tried to warn people, tried to stop it, even when no one believed her. I found her at the airport hours later, after we'd all been released. She was sitting alone in a corner, looking exhausted. Thank you, I said, for trying to warn me, for not giving up even when I didn't listen. She looked up, managed a tired smile. You listened eventually, that's what matters. I almost didn't. I almost ignored you completely. But you didn't. That feeling you had that something was wrong, you listened to that, even if you didn't listen to me right away. We talked for a while. She explained how terrifying it had been to know something was wrong but not be able to prove it, how frustrated she'd felt when authorities dismissed her concerns. I kept thinking, she said, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid and I cause all this chaos for nothing? But then I thought, what if I'm right and I don't say anything? You made the right choice, I told her. Did I? We still had to go through that emergency. People were still terrified. But we're alive, all of us, because you paid attention, because you trusted your instincts. She nodded slowly. I guess that's what matters. They gave us hotel rooms that night, put us on different flights the next day to our various destinations. I never made it to Dubai, called my contacts there, explained what happened, rescheduled everything. But I learned something that day that was more valuable than any business meeting or vacation. I learned to trust that uncomfortable feeling. That instinct that tells you something is wrong, even when everything looks fine on the surface. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak up, even when no one believes you, even when you have no proof, even when people think you're crazy. And I learned that the person trying to save your life might be a complete stranger who slips you a napkin with 7 words on it. Sarah and I stayed in touch after that. Not close friends, but we check in with each other occasionally. She still works as a flight attendant, still trusts her instincts, still speaks up when something feels wrong. And me? I never ignore that feeling anymore. Never dismiss a warning just because it seems unlikely or inconvenient. Because that day on that flight, I learned that sometimes the difference between life and death is just paying attention to the small things that don't quite fit. The nervous flight attendant who seems too scared. The passenger who checks his watch too many times. The quiet conversation you overhear that sounds just slightly off. Those small things can mean everything. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Trust your instincts. Listen when someone tries to warn you. And never ever ignore that uncomfortable feeling in your gut that tells you something isn't right. Because one day, that feeling or that napkin with 7 words might save your life.